Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. This is the beginning of a new multi series program on the Islamic practices and the rules of various aspects of Islam, the do's and don'ts. Generally, we study these topics under the topic of fiqh. This is based on an internationally renowned course that Shaykh Amir Bahjat from Madinah Munawarra developed. As you know, the course, it is only in Arabic, and tens of thousands of people benefited because what he did was took traditional aspects of what's in the traditional books but presented in an easy manner, without compromising on the content. So it gives you a skeleton, a structured way to go from between the various topics of fiqh, and puts it in diagram form so that it's easy to digest the content and make sense of the rulings of fiqh, which we need for our life, how to live our life in a way that's pleasing to Allah. So, as always, with any course or any content, any learning of deen that we set out to learn about Islam and deen, our deen, because the do's and don'ts of Islam are the means of, so doing the good and refraining from the don'ts is the means of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's fulfilling the order of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, fulfilling the orders of Allah and fulfilling the orders of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. By it, we earn the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, we always have to correct our intention. I have to correct my intention in delivering this, and also those who are listening and they want to learn this. There are brothers and sisters who requested to do a course, to actually do recordings of this course. I do teach privately to many brothers, and of course, there's always the constant messages and so forth that we answer questions and so forth, which is a normal part of being imam and so forth. But to do it in a structured way, and then so people have like a complete course or complete overview in a simple manner of the do's and don'ts and practice of Islam. So as we do this, the first thing is to correct our intention. If I'm those teaching, those studying, they should always correct the intention that they're doing this for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to learn what is correct, so that when they act, they do it in a proper way to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With every science, always it's very important to learn the status of that knowledge or that science. So fiqh or jurisprudence or the rules of Islam or the do's and don'ts of Islam has a high premium and value in Islam. Fiqh itself, the word fiqh in linguistically meant to understand or understanding. And fiqh, generally how Muslims today use the word is for sharia or the do's and don'ts, what's permissible, impermissible, how we should do the action, what is the value of the action, is this fard, is this sunnah, is it merely permissible, is this makruh, is it haram. That's how we generally understand fiqh today. And fiqh has a huge, very high status in Islam, because by means of fiqh, we know what is pleasing to Allah and what is displeasing to Allah, what is more pleasing to Allah, what is less pleasing to Allah. And the ulama that engage in it, engage in the teaching of fiqh. I mean, one of the ulama mentioned that 90%, 99% of the questions, and this is, I can tell you from experience as being imam for many years, 99% of the questions that are asked seldomly get asked about tafsir point or a hadith explanation or a language issue in Arabic or something, other topics. 99% of the questions that we get asked is about fiqh. What are the do's and don'ts of Islam? Is this permissible? Is not permissible? Is this good? It's not good. And then there's of course the specific cases that people present. So it's got a high value because by means of it we attain if we adhere to its rules, its parameters, then we attain the rida or the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a very simple and structured course, very easy to understand, and it is based on the fiqh and the madhab of the great Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah, one of the four great imams in Islam whose schools have survived intact, and they are the best expression of practicing the Quran and Sunnah in our time. People have come up with their own variations or mixtures, but really those four, they've survived the test of time throughout the Muslim world over a millennium, and any alim of any worth in the history of Islam after the 2nd century adhered to one of these four schools. So these masail will be according to the Hanbali school or the school of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, rahimahullah. Fiqh is generally divided into 4 quarters, you could say. They're not in equal size because some have more content than the other. The first is ibadat or worship. So this will cover things like, this is the course that we're starting today is starting off with this ibadat or worship. Ibadat is a plural of ibadah. Ibadah means to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Secondly, muamalat or buyu' or Islamic commercial law, transactions. How you do a contract, how you do an agreement, a business partnership. How do you do, the rules of buying and selling, rules of interest, right? Is interest. So this comes in the purview in the scope of fiqh al-muamalat or the quarter of muamalat or buyu'. Third is fiqh al-usra or family law, issues related to custody, marriage, divorce. These all come in this. And finally, fiqh al-jinayat or the fiqh of criminal law. Now, and even today you see, like, I'm in Australia, so you see even courts are divided like this as well. So you do have courts that deal with commercial law aspects, business, small businesses, and so forth. You have family law courts. You have criminal law courts. So even legal systems, modern legal systems, are also divided to a certain degree according to these divisions. So these are the four we call quarters, and any masala, on any issue, any do's or don'ts of Islam fit into one of these four. There's no fifth, right? All Islamic law, do's and don'ts, fit into one of these four categories. So there's some questions here. In which of the following? So let's now, looking back at these four, or I mean the 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, which of the four categories would the following be in? Firstly, think about this: lease or a rent agreement. So this could be a lease for a house or a lease for a car, for example, or renting a car. There is an agreement that is made. Which of the four categories? That's right, it will be number 2. Commercial law, buyu' or muamalat. Child custody, I mentioned it before. This would definitely fit into the category of fiqh al-usra or family law. Zakat on gold. It's a little bit trickier. Zakat on gold. So although when we do zakat on gold, we're measuring the value, and then on possession that we have, financial or a monetary possession that we have, which is gold. But when we're doing the zakat, because zakat comes in the category of ibadat, this is not, so although it looks, there's a business aspect of it, you could say it's dealing with the material possession, but actually zakat is in the chapter of, and we'll go through that later, comes in the category of ibadat or worship. Divorce via text message. A talaq or a divorce is given by a message or email. There's different ways divorce can be given. Which category would this be in? This will be definitely in the fiqh al-usra or family law. Murder. Murder is, of course, comes in jinayat, the fourth category, or criminal law. And generally, when we, living in a Muslim minority situation in the English-speaking world, the fourth category is applied in some Muslim countries, like the Shari'i standards. But this is something that is beyond the scope of, let's say, imams and Muslim communities. That's something that the state always, even in Muslim country, it's a state, only the state handles these. But commercial law, if you're doing a private contract, ibadat, all of these things, family law, we do ask imams and Muslim associations, and this service for the first 3. Generally, most of our fiqh, living in our situation, we're dealing with 1, 2, and 3, and not the fourth one. So the first category, ibadat, or the fiqh of worship, there's 5 areas that are covered. Tahara, purification, which is a prerequisite. It's linked to salat. Because it's a prerequisite for salat, then it's something that's usually taught in the fiqh books first. Salat itself, the 5-time daily prayer. So tahara means purification or Islamic hygiene or cleanliness. Salat means, literally salat means dua, like a prayer, but prayer not as in the 5 times, just making a prayer and asking Allah. When you're asking Allah, it's called salat. But generally, the way we understand today, and the word is used, is in the 5-time daily salat. Salawat khamsa, the 5-time daily salawat. Salawat is a plural of salat. So this is how generally we use this word today. So the 5-time daily prayer, which is compulsory on everyone. Zakat, the annual compulsory charity, which purifies our hearts and also purifies our wealth, purifies the heart from the greed of wealth. Hajj, the once in a lifetime compulsory pilgrimage for those who can afford it. And Sawm, fasting the month of Ramadan. Generally, the details on tahara and salat are the most, because this is something that we have to do all the time. 5 times daily, we have to be in a state of tahara, and we have to pray 5 times a day. what is the definition of salat itself before we continue? So generally in fiqh books, they mention it's specific actions and specific speech that begins with takbir, saying Allahu Akbar, and ends with salam. This is the definition of salat. What is salat? Someone asked, what is salat? It's specific speech and specific actions that begins with takbir, saying Allahu Akbar, and finishes with salam. So in fiqh books also mention fasting, specific refraining from by a specific person in a specific time from specific things. You're refraining. So if you ask the average Muslim what's fasting, they say don't eat and drink from dawn till dusk. Most people understand that. From Fajr, before Fajr, stop eating and drinking. That's the simple understanding. But in fiqh book, there's a technical definition of fasting. Specific refraining from specific person, like each one's got its own definition, specific time from specific things, which is there in the public or the average person's definition. But if you this definition, most people will not understand, because it's something that is a technical definition in books. So the chapters that we'll cover in under salat, the 5-time daily salat, is first the shart. There's a singular, the plural is shurut, meaning the prerequisites or the preconditions. Rukun or arkan, the pillars or the compulsory, the fard acts that you have to do in each salat. Shurut is before the action, while arkan, they're both fard, but shart is like for example, purification is before salat, right? And the rukun, arkan are the faraid that are in salat. Wajibat are also a necessary action that you have to do, and if you miss it, you can make up for it, as opposed to rukun. If you miss a rukun, you have to repeat the prayer. As wajibat, there is a way to make up for it, but it's also compulsory. You have to do it. So the better word for wajibat, wajib singular, wajibat is a plural, just the at is added there at the end. Sunan plural, and sunnah is a singular. So this is sunnah acts that are recommended, that is good to do. There's many sunnah acts to do in prayer, but they're not compulsory. Mubahat, things that are permissible in prayer. They're not bad to do, they're not good, but if you do it, your salat is fine. They're permissible acts that are in salat. Makruhat are disliked. They are not disliked, they're disliked, but they don't, not to the point of where they're forbidden in the prayer. There's mubtilat, those things that if you do them in salat, it breaks. For example, you're speaking, or you change your direction from the qibla with no reason, right? If you turn around, then if you turn away too much from the qibla, or you move too much in salat, it breaks the salat. You have to restart. So these are the invalidators of prayer. We're going to go through each one of these in detail, inshallah. Types of salat. So for example, you got the 5-time salat. You got salatul Jummah, salatul Eid. You've got the salat of the eclipse, salatul Taraweeh that we do every night of Ramadan after Isha, salatul Witr. So there's different types of other salat, non-compulsory, compulsory salat that we should be doing. And finally, errors in salat, things that are reduce the reward of salat, or they might even invalidate salat, but they're mistakes in salat. So we're going to go through each of these in detail, inshallah. Regards to the first point, shurut, prerequisites of the musalli. So these are prerequisites for the musalli or the worshipper or the prayer in salat. So these are things that are before. First thing is that the person, these are conditions for the musalli, he has to be a Muslim. Salat is invalid from a kafir, disbeliever, non-Muslim. So salat, are the kuffar addressed? Do they still have to, is the obligation of salat on them, on the kuffar? Are they obliged to do salat? Are the kuffar obliged to do salat? So there's a difference amongst the ulama, but the Hanbali ulama say the ayat of Quran is presented as a proof when they asked the people in Jahannam, the kuffar that in Jahannam, they asked, Ma salakakum fi saqar? Why are you in Jahannam for? So one of the things they present as people who denied in the hereafter, this mentioned at the end of the ayat, it's qualified that we know that these are disbelievers, that they are kuffar. Lam naku min al-musallin. We were not of people who made salat. So even though they were kafir in this world, they denied the hereafter, but the way they identify themselves, the reason why they're in Jahannam, they didn't pray. So they're still obliged to do it, but if a kafir was to do salat, his salat will be invalid. To be sound of mind, someone is mentally handicapped, they're not obliged to do it. It's neither valid from them, nor is it an obligation upon them. Allah has absolved them of salat. Bulugh, when the person reaches the age of maturity or puberty, it is compulsory that salat of a child is not valid. They're taught to pray from a young age, but maturity is a condition for the validity of the salat, and not to be in haid or nifas. This only applies to women, obviously. Haid means a monthly period or menses, and nifas means the after birth discharge, the bleeding after giving birth. In both these states, salat is invalid. Actually, it's haram, and so when they come out of that bleeding finishes, then they can pray the salat. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding and tawfiq to practice what we're saying here. These, I'll be, inshallah, try every week to put up because I have to translate this and then create the slides, inshallah. So make dua that I can do this. You can ask questions, by all means, ask questions in the description, in the content comment section below. I'll try. It's a small channel, so it's not an issue to answer questions. Hopefully I can get to all those questions. If I don't know the answer to the questions, then I'll send it to one of my teachers who are specialists in Hanbali Fiqh. Send it overseas and ask the question. Hopefully get an answer to you. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.